in this very woke generation, you think you're in the mainstream. But I put it to you that if censorship, as the type that I'm worried you're supporting, were around when the suffragettes wanted the right to vote for women, well, that's outrageous. When Martin Luther King called for the equality of all races, that's outrageous. When gay rights was an issue 50 years ago, that's outrageous, that's offensive, that's against the order. So I put it to you that free speech is the tool of the underdog. And now that you have some power, don't use that free speech against another underdog.
Well, welcome folks. Thanks for joining us today. Of course, thanks to the British Council, the FCL, and the Canadian government for putting this on and for having us as folks who, I guess, facilitate this discussion. For those who are wondering who we are and what we do, we are the Competence Network. We are a bipartisan news network, and what we do primarily is we try and improve the way young people consume digital journalism. I say young, but millennials, so everyone has an honorary millennial. And we try and do it by getting people to come together, ideological opposites, debating, discussing, and really sharing thoughts and ideas. I think by doing that, we can learn about the other side, learn about people who disagree with us, and be informed by them, quite frankly. So we've got a really fascinating panel who I'm going to ask to introduce themselves. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the discussion, and this is discussion, so we want you guys to get involved as well. And we've got Esther there with a roving mic, so if at any stage you want to kind of give your piece, obviously make it nice and succinct. We're going to get you involved as well, but let's first meet our stars, if you like, right? And they all have mics. I'm going to ask you guys to just tell us a bit about yourself, what's relevant, and perhaps not what you'd like to, just what's relevant, and then we'll crack on. So we'll start from this end and we'll work back this way.
Hello. My name's Jazza. I am a digital content creator. So I work across multiple platforms. I have 2 podcasts, which isn't enough. A YouTube channel. I was a creator for change for YouTube last year, where I made a documentary about LGBT refugees in the UK and across the EU. And I have also worked with companies in the third sector over the last few years around kind of like youth engagement. So I was probably most heavily involved in the largest voter registration drive in the UK when I was part of Bite the Ballot, where we registered 300,000 people in a day, which is pretty cool. I'm also the only person at this conference in shorts.
Hi, I'm Ezra Levant. A couple years ago, I debuted a movie called Shunned about LGBTQ refugees in Tel Aviv.
We can be friends.
They fled from the West Bank and Gaza Strip where they would have been honor killed, and so they're living in Tel Aviv. They're Muslim, gay men and women, so it's an incredible story. I'm a digital content creator too, but I didn't wear shorts, I'm jealous. I guess my claim to fame in the media freedom point of view is that about a dozen years ago, when I published a magazine, made a paper, we republished the Danish cartoons of Mohammed. And I was prosecuted for 900 days by the government of my region. And they only dropped the case when we managed to shame them. More recently, the Canadian government has banned my news outlet, directing the United Nations to not accredit our journals. So I'm frankly shocked I was allowed in here, and I'm doubly shocked you allowed me on the panel. But thanks, Mike.
Always welcome.
Okay, my name is Minna. I'm a junior news editor from Egypt. I'm also a Future News Worldwide alumni, if you know alumnus. You know this? Yeah. Okay. So basically what I do is that back home I pick and choose between subjects and I present what I think matters the most, and then it gets picked up. Sorry.
Alright, I'm Alexandra, I'm from Hungary, and I'm also a Future News Worldwide alumni. So here the left side is representing the Future News Worldwide project. So I work as an online news editor for Hungary's main English news site for those who don't speak English but are still interested in news about Hungary. And I hope I can be of interest because the media industry is quite complicated and has been through a lot of changes in Hungary, so I hope I can have some valuable input.
Hi, is that one on? Cool. I'm Ashley Hannah. I'm editor of the Tab Glasgow, have been for a few years, which is an entirely student-run online publication. I'm also here with the British Council Future News Worldwide alumni, and I'm actually moving away from journalism into government policy advising now, so have a couple of angles to come at this from, but thanks for coming.
Lovely. Well, we've got lots of great people here, and I know we have equally lots of great people there. So feel free to make your voices heard, as I said, and we want this to be as round as we can. So this is kind of a horseshoe. If we could make it round and you guys get involved, that would be lovely. For those wondering, my name is Michael Nee, and I, like I said, I'm the founder of the Panelists Network. My real interest is studying argumentation, so I'm currently working on the PhD looking at cyber balkanization, essentially how communities gather or amalgamate online and how they debate, and then echo chambers and things of that nature. So I will be firm but fair. We want to start off by exploring the divisions or perhaps the differences between traditional media and social media. So to set the scene, we know something like the Brexit Party was founded sometime the 20th of January 2019. But this same party, on the 23rd of May, we saw them beat some parties who have been around for over 100 years, right, in an election which no one thought they could do well in when they first formed. Now their primary tool, and this is said by the leader himself, was social media. So social media initially, which was a tool that was scoffed at by people, it won't last, it's useless, they said, has been the primary tool that's allowed a party in no less than 6 months to actually win a major election. How has that happened, and what's the role now of traditional media? Who wants to start off?
I would challenge your analysis of what happened. Although the Brexit Party had a really amazing social media campaign, like I welled up at some of the videos that they made, and I'm like the Ramona in chief. Like like they had a really brilliant digital campaign. But the reason that they won an election is because they were founded by Nigel Farage, who gets a disproportionate amount of mainstream media attention. I think we have to remember that even though probably all of us are on Twitter, it's something like 7% of the people of voting age are actually on Twitter. And so all of the majority of the groundwork that was made for the Brexit Party specifically, in this case, was done because there was already a premise of a high-profile politician like Nigel Farage getting a load of attention on like the Today programme and on like media sports and all of those kind of things. That's not to say social media wasn't important, but I don't think it is what won the Brexit Party that election.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a foreigner, so I wouldn't want to disagree with a Brit. But
Good.
what I know about social media is that it is grassroots, it's ground up, it's anyone can have a say. And so it takes the power away from the established media, who frankly are in the main, they're Remainers, and they don't much like Nigel Farage or anyone even to the further right. And so that's why, after Donald Trump used social media so effectively in 2016, shortly after that, Google, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all started to crack down on conservative-leaning social media. They shut down 30,000 Marine Le Pen Facebook pages in France. They shut down Jair Bolsonaro's WhatsApp groups in Brazil. So because traditional media is sympathetic to the parties of the establishment, the incumbents, social media is for the revolutionaries. So just like they did in Tahrir Square, Cairo, they shut down the social media. And in the UK, that means deplatforming Tommy Robinson. In the United States, that means shutting down conservatives. And because social media is the place for dissidents.
Gotcha. Now, let's go straight to the crowd now. Anyone in the crowd want to kind of give their thoughts? So, let's start at the front here.
I have a really big issue with this idea that social media is for dissidents. I actually don't think that there is a huge amount of variation on social media. I think it's the ultimate place for echo chambers. I think we all listen to people that we like to listen to. I think why social media is so effective and what Brexit Party used it for is actually the fact that it allows us to then go offline. I think people can meet each other that they wouldn't be able to meet in real life and then can meet offline and make change. And I think this is where it comes to your point. I don't think social media did win the Brexit Party. It did help the Brexit Party win, but it helped them organise and facilitate them to win offline. And I think that's what we need to start seeing. Social media isn't a whole new place, it's a tool. And I think we need to start recognising it as that. It's like Google. It's like, we don't talk about Google winning an election. But actually I think we need to start viewing social media as such.
I'd like someone here to respond to that. Do you want to respond to anything that's been said so far?
I can go. Yeah. I think that. Sorry. I think that what you said can be completely true, and with that opportunity and that arena for debate, there's a responsibility to use social media in a way that is gonna encourage that challenge, because it can massively, like you said, we follow who we like and we follow who we listen to, and I think it's up to our generation, like all users, but predominantly our generation, as we're the ones who are shaping this next generation of journalists, that we need to follow the people that we don't agree with, and we need to follow the people that totally offend us so much that we want to scream. And that's how you end up with it, using it in the best way and using it as a really powerful tool to understand and better construct these arguments.
Yeah, so I think this whole topic of social media always raises the question, who has the responsibility? Do we all have the responsibility, or shall we point at someone who should have the main responsibility of checking the smaller barriers of responsibilities?
We're moving very fast here. I kind of want to slow down the pace a bit, because the discussion initially, if you remember, it's more about traditional media versus social media. So for instance, in 2007, the Brexit Party, then UKIP, was described by David Cameron as a party of fruitcakes and loonies. It was a fringe party that no one wanted to speak about. And for the most part, I think people would probably agree and say they probably didn't get that much media coverage. Now it's, mainstream media coverage, i.e. Major newspapers kind of saying this is good, this is great. Typically,
UKIP was the biggest party after the European election before the last one. They were the biggest party that the UK sent to Europe.
The point I'm trying to make is, what we've now seen with a lot of these parties since 2007 is they've used social media to really organise themselves. So the point is really, is traditional media still fit for purpose? If people are finding ways to circumvent speaking to people, if Trump can just speak directly to the American people rather than going through news outlets, are things changing in a way that we quite frankly weren't ready for? I'd love to get Ezra to speak up.
Sure, and I think that's a good thing. When I say that social media is for dissidents, I don't mean it's only for dissidents. Most social media is just, dating chats or music or entertainment. My point is, it is the only place where dissidents can go. I mean, how many presenters on the BBC are UKIP or Brexit Party? Zero. So if you're a dissident, it's the one place where you're not, maybe you're not silenced. And that's what's so wonderful about it. I won't jump ahead to the regulation part, but the sponsor of this conference, besides the two governments, is Pierre Omidyar and the Illuminate Group. He's a billionaire who owns The Intercept and the Bulwark left-wing media. So he has a vested interest in squelching competitors in social media. 2 years ago, he put out a position paper saying social media is dangerous because it allows populists to get support. Exactly. If you are a force of the incumbent and the establishment, you don't want dissidents. You don't want social media. You want three identical channels saying the same thing within a very narrow bandwidth. The sponsor of this conference, Pierre Omidyar, wants to narrow the bandwidth because he doesn't like these populist groups.
I think we should stop thinking about the idea, and I'm sorry I'm blowing the whole premise of this panel out of the water. I don't think we should be thinking about traditional media and social media. I think we should be thinking about social media as another form of media alongside TV, radio, newspapers, podcasts. I think they are all kind of they're part of this ecosystem. Frankly, Trump wouldn't be getting headlines if there weren't mainstream journalists willing to talk about him for hours on Fox News or on CNN or on the BBC. It is, those traditional gatekeepers still exist because, as I said, we're all on Twitter, but most people aren't. Most people are not getting notifications at 4 in the morning when Trump tweets about Putin or what, and how he's going to kick him out of the country and whatever. Like, I don't like. There is this idea that the social is kind of like this place for dissonance, but it isn't going to hit our front doors unless the gatekeepers decide that it can, frankly.
That's a great point. I'm going to take this lady, just because you're quite close, and we'll come like this.
Yeah. You're from Hungary, yeah? Yeah, so I'm just thinking of our conversations from a certain perspective and a certain type of democracy, whatever democratic arena. Hungary is very different. How different, when you hear this debate, what do you think?
Yeah, I actually wanted to jump in. So, speaking from my experience, what we have been seeing in Hungary is that traditional media has become the valuable media, the one that you can trust, the one that you can believe in. And then there is a rising wave of social media and upcoming new initiatives and grassroots movements. But what we see is that okay, maybe it's similar in Egypt, right? And I think this is something characteristic to the Central European region. I think I can say that. So the differentiation between traditional media and new media, so to say, I think is along the line of professionalism. But Hungary in general is characterized by a low rate of professionalism, if I can say, at least according to the Hallin and Mancini media system division. We belong to the pluralist, polarized media system category, which is, well, with the emphasis being on polarized. We can see that traditional media is still there. There is centralization in traditional media sources. For example, the newspaper market in the countryside, so regarding the whole of Hungary, it belongs to a businessman very close to the government, but still traditional media is thought of as being valuable and being trustworthy.
I want to also set the scene, if you like, for something else I'd like you to consider, which is also, I mean, it's here to stay. This is the thing. I mean, many people will say we're going through a period, and in a couple of years, people will go off social media and things will change. I don't think that's going to happen. If my little brother's lifestyle is anything to go by,
is he on TikTok?
Yeah, this is. Yeah, I don't even know. I don't know what that is. I thought he was making the sound.
Okay, Grandad.
Yeah, apparently it's an app. But there you go. The point is, this is what's happening. The media landscape is changing very quickly, and some folks, don't believe it's happening. You kind of feel like an Old Testament prophet sometimes, but it's happening. But that's the thing. If we are going to inherit this new media landscape where anyone can create news, and if something happens, the police can just tweet about it rather than go into a newspaper, and Donald Trump can speak directly to people. He can block people on Twitter if he doesn't agree with them. Is this good for democracy? That the power's been so democratized. Is it actually a good thing? And what happens to fake news and the rise of AR, VR, people using this new landscape, who albeit are more proficient at using it for the time being, using it to sow discord and to really kind of mess things up, so to speak. I'd like you to consider that, and I'll go straight here because I know you already want to speak, right?
I want to challenge the idea that we're in echo chambers, because, and I know that we were talking about the fact that we need to use two sources, and I cannot remember which studies have shown this. I'm sorry, forgive me, but I'm pretty sure that people are now exposed to more variations of news sources than they ever have before. And people, when they're looking for a diversity of opinions, do go to social media. And so actually I think there's this idea that we are in these kind of echo chambers and we never hear about any other dissenting opinions. But I just don't think that that's really true. So, can he have a
mic? Give him a mic?
I can't hear you, sir.
If anyone understands the fundamentals of algorithms and marketing, most of the time it does not allow that. People have to understand that when you look at Instagram, I think 7% of your followers will actually view your post unless you're like a business. And that's typically what happens with a lot of news outlets and typically with social media. Unless you can pay into marketing, people will be allowed to see it. So that's what I mean when I talk about that. It has become an echo chamber. So when I debate most people don't know about anything else. So like I watch all different types of media. I've even watched Rebel Media UK, and I find they're all incredibly interesting. And I'm not saying I necessarily agree with everything you guys say, but I have the strength of my personality to watch absolutely everything. We don't have that. And what social media has done is accelerated mental health because people don't know how to take on different opinions anymore. And social media, you're right, social media is here to stay, but it's not to the benefit of human beings more so than anything else. I think social media is going to be very similar to smoking. In a couple of years, you're going to realize how dangerous the effects are. Just because you cannot feel them physically does not mean that it mentally doesn't endanger you.
Yeah, I don't think all echo chambers are bad. Safe spaces are great for marginalised people to come together, to be able to build a language and actually be able to get support so that you can go into spaces like everyday life and have to exist and justify your existence to people that think you shouldn't exist. I think that on Twitter, if I really wanted to engage with people, I could just type a hashtag in or an @ or type a word in and I'd be able to get a range of views on it. But it's my choice to follow who I follow, and if I follow the people that I know that will support me, that's because it's exhausting to live and have your entire existence put into question everywhere.
Yeah, let's get some thoughts from the panelists. Anyone?
Well, I think there used to be one big echo chamber where you had all the range of diversity from The Guardian to the BBC. That's like saying the whole range from all the way from A to B.
Oh, come on, the Daily Mail's pretty out there.
But now we have a million voices, and I think that's good, because we can choose our own echo chamber as opposed to having someone else choose it for us. Can I address one more thing that you said, Mike? You used the word fake news, and I've heard that way too much at this free speech conference, because fake news is in the eye of the beholder. Let me give you an example. I'm on the right. So I think that the theory of man-made global warming, I'm a skeptic. I call it fake news. You say no, your view is fake. Or take the conspiracy theory that Donald Trump colluded with Russia. For 2 years, that was absolutely conventional wisdom until an exhaustive investigation by a Democrat named Robert Mueller proved it to be false. So I call that fake news, but you would call what my opinion's fake news. And fake news is just what we are using to shut up our opponents through censorship, this call for social media companies to shut down fake news. Well, and Donald Trump calls CNN fake news, and CNN calls Donald Trump fake news. It's just like calling someone a dummy. Like, it has no meaning. And so often at this conference, which is allegedly about freedom of speech, we've heard, oh, but we got to crack down on fake news. Fake news according to whom? And by the way, conspiracies often start with conspiracy theory. In New York, a man named Epstein was just charged with countless acts of pedophilia, and for years that was called a crazy conspiracy theory. Well, it turned out, looks like it's true. So I don't feel good about a conference on media freedom saying, oh, we got to crack down on this fake news. No, the answer to fake news is for you to rebut it with what you think is real news, and let the people decide for themselves. I'm not a child, I can make up my own mind.
Okay, some more thoughts from the crowd, from the panel, and then we'll move over to the audience who are bursting to speak. We're going to come to you, don't you worry. Go ahead.
Can I just make one brief point? I'm not going to comment on all of that.
Don't.
Because there's a lot there. But there's one thing I really agree with you on, and it's that the reason that social media is so important for me is that I really strongly believe that there needs to be a platform for all of those opinions, and I can say that because I haven't been the victim of a lot of this online abuse and xenophobia and racism and all those things, but I do believe that we need to give some form of platform to those voices, because if they don't have an arena for debate, an arena for discussion, like where do they take those? Where do those opinions go? And I think that where they go is worse than online. But I know I'm in a privileged position, but I think that that's really important that we have that diversity. Not saying I agree with anything else, but
So I would have to agree with Hannah, because see, in Egypt, we completely lost trust, or the public completely lost trust in the traditional media outlets. So we go to these safe spaces online, on groups, on things like that online, where we share our opinion, where we share news that we think are important. And of course, this is something that has also both a positive side and a negative side. It's very dangerous. It's very, it moves between the both. So.
Actually, let's get some thoughts.
Thanks very much. Really interesting conversation. I think just the one thing I wanted to maybe add into this is this conversation about there's no such thing as fake news, there's just differences of opinion. And I think that is the single most important change that social media has made to the media landscape, is this idea that everything is a matter of opinion and interpretation. And actually, I think that there is a role, maybe it's for state broadcasters or impartial new platforms for news, who actually seek to find out the facts, because facts do exist. There are things that are not a matter of opinion. And I think the way that social media has changed the way that traditional media works in sort of chasing clicks, chasing these things, the press has changed their role to being just providers of comment and analysis, which is ultimately one guy's opinion or one woman's opinion. And actually we do need to reassert that there are some things that are just objective, knowable facts, and got to look for that.
I'm just gonna, if you could just tell me that, and just got to clear up a bit, I'll come to the crowd, and you can speak.
Thank you. I really want to bounce off of that, because you're basically saying what I want to say, but I'm going to take it a step further, and everyone's going to disagree with me, but hear it out. And I'm actually going to say, there's some things you just can't say.
No, there's not.
And there actually is. You cannot incite violence, and there are fringe views that actually do not have a platform. And that is something that we have to now start to understand, because freedom, we like to believe that we're living in a democracy that's heading towards freedom. We do not allow murder. We do not believe in rape. These are things that we have decided as a society that we are not allowed to do. We need to believe that in terms of speech as well. There are just some things you can't say, and that's a discussion we have to have. But I'm sorry, you can't incite violence. You can't encourage rape. Like, these are things that are...
How would you encourage it? Hold on, just if you could just round up.
And like, so for me, I think actually that's what it comes down to, is like, yes, we have to platform different ideas, and I definitely respect some things, but there are just some things you can't say.
Okay, well, let's move to the panel. I think Jazza had a point to make, and then we'll go to Ezra.
I think that's an interesting way of approaching it. At my core, I disagree with it. But I need to digest that, because I think that's an interesting view. But a lot of we have laws that make those kind of things illegal. Like, if you incite violence, like, that is an illegal thing, whether it happens on Twitter or whether it happens in person or in a letter. And so I am unconvinced by kind of like the attack on. Ooh, interesting. I mean, interesting kind of like the way that social media has kind of like blurred this area of what is illegal and what isn't. And I think that this is an interesting thing to bounce off of what you were saying as well, with I would really like it if we just didn't use the word fake news, because there are opinions which are not fake news. Those are takes on kind of like data points, and you can have different interpretations of data points. And then there is like binary scientific fact, not talking about anything in specifics, Ezra. But there are, like, I think that fake news has become this catch-all, and Trump was very clever when he ended up throwing it back at CNN, because then it became, well, it's just an opinion I don't agree with. But there is a problem with the way that stuff is presented and the way that disinformation is presented.
So let me pose that question to you. So you mentioned the initial point about fake news. Surely you agree that there are some things that are actually fake news, namely it didn't happen, or that's not the actual number, or the economy is actually shrinking. Surely there are some conclusive, objective data points that you think can't be spun. I mean, of course,
the world being flat.
Sure, that's right, but I wouldn't want to stop someone from saying a lie. It shouldn't be against the law to lie. It shouldn't be against the law to be wrong. And the idea that we would censor someone who's wrong, well, each one of us is going to be wrong at some time. Can I say one thing?
Hold on. What about when they're wrong deliberately to manipulate a large group of people?
Are you talking about political campaigns now? Because every single politician who ever lived has been described in just that way by their opponents, who are described that way by the first politician. And it is up to each of us as responsible adults to be the final arbiter. And I heard a few times from the panel and from the crowd, couldn't we have some ultimate source, some unimpeachable person, probably from the government? What? You trust the government? And the thing is, we're not angels. None of us are saints. None of us are all-knowing. And there's a greater dispersed wisdom amongst each of us. And so we can all see a liar who's a liar and all come to our own views about it. But the thing is, you think Corbyn's a truth teller, and I think Farage is a truth teller, and that's irreconcilable, and I don't need a government arbiter. Let each one of us be an arbiter of our own.
Mate, I'm a Lib Dem, so I don't know what you're talking about.
There you go.
Right.
Can I have 30 seconds with the very important question that this young lady mentioned? The central characteristic of a death threat is not the expressive idea, it's the violence. A fraud, if you forge a check, it's not an expressive act, it's the thieving, right? So I agree with you that we should ban certain kinds of speech where the speech is the incidental and the substance of it is a real crime, like a death threat. That's not actually, the main part of that is not I'm just expressing myself, it's I'm trying to threaten you. I think we need to distinguish between real crimes with words, and there are very few of them, versus something that's just odious, mean, offensive, racist, or wrong. And each of us has the right to be wrong. And let me tell you that in this very woke generation, you think you're in the mainstream. But I put it to you that if censorship, as the type that I'm worried you're supporting, were around when the suffragettes wanted the right to vote for women, well, that's outrageous. When Martin Luther King called for the equality of all races, that's outrageous. When gay rights was an issue 50 years ago, that's outrageous, that's offensive, that's against the order. So I put it to you that free speech is the tool of the underdog. And now that you have some power, don't use that free speech against another underdog, because you never know who will be right one day, like Galileo.
But it's so often that people who have the power are those who are using free speech
People
as a
with the
weapon.
power don't need free speech because they have all the power. They have
No,
the power.
hold on.
If you have nothing else besides free speech, that's enough.
No, but then you have stuff like misinformation about climate change. So we know that in the 70s...
Well, you and I disagree.
No, hold on. We know that in the 1970s that oil corporations were having summits on what they were going to do about man-made global warming and about the increased release of carbon into the atmosphere.
In the 70s, they were worried about global cooling, my friend.
Sorry, climate change. But they were having those conversations back in the 1970s.
Now who's the conspiracy theorist?
No, but...
Now who's the conspiracy theorist, my friend?
I mean, you can say that, but
well,
I will...
Tell me the name of these companies. See, who's going to arbitrate this?
Would you like me to send you sources later?
I'm gonna arbitrate this. So, just like some power, right? We're gonna go to the woman back, and then I'm gonna come back and get some thoughts from you.
Oh, sorry. Sorry to go back again, but can I just get some clarification on the lying comment? When you said you don't want to stop people from lying, do you mean that you think it's okay for journalists to lie?
Well, if it wasn't okay for journalists to lie, and if it wasn't okay for politicians to lie, we'd need to build more jails. It's up to each of us as thoughtful and skeptical consumers of information to make those judgments, because what I think is a lie, you may think is the truest thing ever said.
No, but you're talking about intent. So if somebody is deliberately making up a lie, that's not okay then?
I'm not saying it's morally okay, but I would rather live in a society where I have to be alert to possible tricksters than live in a society where some great high priest will make all those grown-up decisions for me, and I will be told just whatever's left you can believe. And that some young people here would think that the government is the one to trust as the arbiter. Oh my
Well, of course, and we should make a distinction between journalists and politicians, because journalists should be holding politicians to account.
Exactly. Instead
you
of
lump
the other
them
way
together,
around.
they're supposed to be separate. So surely journalists should have higher standards and should not be lying.
By the government. Most journalists in the UK, the news reporters, work for the BBC. That is a state broadcaster.
Okay, so one thing we haven't done here, and perhaps we should do it, is that you've pretty much expressed that, you know, you've identified two polarities, right? One place where, you know, wild west, anything goes, you just say whatever happens, and then one where we have total state control. What we haven't perhaps done is, on that spectrum, on that continuum, where do you think things ought to be? I mean, do you believe that journalists, as was just asked, should be able to say anything they want, and politicians should say anything they want, and there's no kind of gradation, there's no way we can say this is a fact? I mean, is that what you would advocate for? I mean, where on that continuum should we be?
Oh, I'm not saying there should be no consequences. I'm just saying there should be no government consequences. If you think someone's a liar, cancel your subscription. Boycott them. Tell people, write a letter to the editor, criticize them, start up your own blog. I'm not saying there should be no consequences to lying. I'm just saying the idea that we could trust a handful of anonymous people with an opaque process in Silicon Valley to delete, let's say, Tommy Robbins. 1 million people chose to follow what he had to say on Facebook, and one person in Silicon Valley said, nope, delete.
That's
Probably quite a few people decided that in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, but 1 million wanted to hear what he had to say, but they weren't grown-ups, I guess.
I'd love to hear from the ladies who are actually from...
I've heard the view. I'm going to go here next.
I just wanted to add that we do actually have a platform. You can report anyone for hate speech on Facebook, and that's it. And then this leads us to getting back to being sensitive, that you can report anyone for hate speech. If you feel that a comment is offensive from your point of view, then you can report them, and you can either, even block a whole site. For example, this has happened to us for the website I work for. Someone reported us for hate speech, and we were blocked by Facebook for almost a day.
We know that hate and extremism begins in the echo chambers, right? We know it does. In places where people only consume one type of information, they get riled up, and they're more likely to act on what they're hearing. So, pragmatically speaking here, how do we encourage, and you can speak structurally or more normatively, but how do we encourage people to consume data, points, op-eds, whatever you want to call it, that's different to their pre-existing viewpoints? So let's start with people here, and then perhaps we'll round up when we come to the panel.
Thanks, I really enjoyed the conversation and diversity of views. So my point to answer your question, Mike, I think is we're talking about being grown up and being able to choose and being aware and intelligent, and I'm not sure that everybody has had that opportunity through the education system to be in a position where they have that choice, where they understand potentially how they could be manipulated, or there are lots of vulnerable people out there for all sorts of reasons. So I just think it's really important that in the education system and in good parenting, that we do give children growing up the opportunity to sort of understand, give them, a good education system is absolutely essential to get to a state where we are all able to be discerning consumers of media.
I've got so many things I want to say, but I'm going to say the first thing that I want to do, which was basically, we were talking about kind of choices. And one thing that I've been thinking about, and I think it's a great place to kind of have these conversations where you have the most radical kind of questions, but I never understand why we don't just switch off. For me, sometimes when I feel like social media is becoming an issue, or just media in general, and I can see just a range of different views and nothing makes sense, particularly if you're from the UK, with Brexit, that was just crazy, and as a young person, you were just like, there's no point. I'd rather have the conversation in person, because they were great, and I think the fact that we all kind of switched off and we're having conversations in person is great. But we talk about kind of media and social media, most of it's done through kind of virtual aspects, right? Why can't we just switch off? You can make a choice to switch off. If something is not what you want to see, you can switch off, you can unfollow, you can block, you can dislike, and all of these things. So that's not the issue. And then when we were just speaking now, I think I have a problem with that slightly. I don't really like how in the Western world we always say like there are people that don't have the capabilities to make the decisions that they want. I don't like that, because it basically says that there's a right or wrong way to reach a conclusion when there's not. The fact that we're a different group and where kind of everyone is diverse and inclusive should mean that actually they're not actually vulnerable. That's their opinion, that's their view. And actually we're all vulnerable, because my view can be turned so easily if I'm literally just having one particular thing being thrown at me. So I really disagree with that view of, we need to teach people. I think it's important to have that awareness of what media is and to look at different sources, but I don't think we should be telling people, this is what you need to deem as right, this is what's wrong, this is a lie. We don't always have all the facts.
I think perhaps the point is about kind of increasing people's capacity to choose for themselves, like increasing their bandwidth to actually make a decision themselves. Now, but here's what we're going to do, just so this works out well, and I want us to finish in time, we're sucking for time. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to spend 30 seconds each rounding up our points. To give you, no, I'll be dutiful. Just to give you a chance to prepare, I will speak first. And in that time, don't listen to me and maybe prepare your closing remarks, right?
No, I went first time.
Whilst you prepare for your closing remarks, I just want to firstly thank the British Council and the FCL for putting this on and for allowing the Commons Network to do this. I mean, to be quite frank, those who complain about big actors, well, if there's this great conspiracy to shut you down, why would you be given a chance to speak to the people? I mean, here we've seen an eclectic range of views, and in some way, I hope this kind of demonstrates how you ought to consume news. That doesn't mean you have to agree with everybody, but just hearing views and interacting with them and engaging with them, one may help you realize, okay, I was actually right in my beliefs, or it may challenge you to think something else. So my little part in wisdom is to consume heterogeneous information. Of course, follow the Commons Network, but for the most part, try as hard as you can to consume information from everywhere, and that will help you to reach a more kind of realized, if you like, decision. Now, are we ready? I think we are. Lovely. Let's start from there, and we will go back this way.
I have something fine. I just want to say it's unfair because I started as well.
Okay, I'll tell you what, you did start, so perhaps let's go this way. Yeah, let's go this way.
It's not going to be good, but it's his fault. I think just from experience, the only thing that, I can only speak from my own experience, but the thing that's made me a much healthier news consumer that I've really felt transformed by is like these educational opportunities that I've had. And I think that we do need to try and keep funding those initiatives, keep funding Future News Worldwide, keep funding all those programs in universities. Like I've been to these kind of conflict zones and seen both sides, and the only thing I would say is just be aware of your own biases, because that's the first step to go to overcoming them. And if you think for a second that you're not left wing or right wing, like you definitely are. And I think that once you recognize your own like weaknesses that way, then I can start to be like, okay, well I know that I lean this way, or this was my position, and that's when you start to be like, okay, I used to think this, but now I can incorporate your viewpoint. Yeah, okay, does that mean stop?
Yeah, I want to follow up and say that I completely agree with what Martin was saying, because I do think that it needs to start on the primary level. Critical thinking and analytical thinking are skills that need to be developed and improved. These are going to be the main skills, the more valuable skills in the future. So this is what the future job trends are calling for as well. So I do think that we need to go down to the primary level, and this is where governments and states do come into the picture, because they are the ones who are setting up our social networks. So I think that this is a multi-party question. We all need to do our part, and yeah, I really enjoyed being part of this conversation. Thank you.
So I guess what I have to say eventually is that people need to grow up. And in order for people to grow up, they have to learn on themselves. Like they have to be dependent on, they have to form their own opinions. They have to learn how to gather data, where to go. And all this that we're saying from kind of a privileged place, because we are educated. We know where to look for information and this kind of thing. So I don't believe in censorship, but I do understand why we need to make people aware of everything, just where to look and learn and everything. That's it.
I only need 29 seconds. For my friends who would consider some sort of censorship, either by social media or some grand arbiter, some fact checker, someone who'd say, well, that's just factually not true. I would say, imagine that position being held by your worst political enemy. Because if you think that you're going to be the only one appointing that censor, one day the other side will have those powers that you have created. And how would you like it that way? So beware of the powers you give to the state. They'll be used against you one day.
First of all, follow full fact, because they do that job but aren't your enemy. So they're pretty cool. I also wish that more people were told to grow up in debates. I think that one of the things that we've talked about generally here is like the barrage of information, how that can affect our mental health, and how that can make it harder to make decisions and create echo chambers and all of that kind of stuff. And I think what we are having at the moment is we're being bombarded by lots of viewpoints and opinions, but we're not seeing any of the human beings behind that. I think one of the greatest gifts that I had growing up was my Sunday lunch dinner table, where my uncle voted BNP, my granddad voted UKIP, my mum voted Green, my dad voted Conservative, and me and my brother voted Lib Dem and Green. And we used to, we weren't allowed to speak before dessert came out, I'll tell you that, but I was exposed to almost every single point of the British political spectrum growing up. And I left that dinner table still loving every single member of my family. And I think that do everything with love, essentially, even when you're disagreeing vehemently with Ezra later on Twitter.
Lovely. Thank you so much today. Really great discussion, and of course, thank you to you as well for taking part.
To see all our videos from the Media Freedom Conference, go to mediafreedomconference.com.